The Tsarek battlecruiser Resplendent Fire drifted above the gray curve of Scath Prime, its hull pitted from decades of war. Below, icy windstorms tore across the planet's southern pole, where invisible fissures pulsed with the strange quantum tides of riftstone-buried mineral veins that whispered to space itself, folding time like parchment. Above, the Dominion fleet floated in anxious stillness, guarding a prize that was slipping from their grasp. Aboard the flagship, Admiral Varesh stood unmoving before the main viewport, 4 arms folded neatly behind his back. His carapace shimmered a dull crimson under the bridge's low lighting. Around him, crew worked in silence, minds consumed with intercepted reports of another convoy ambushed, another outpost silenced mid-transmission. The Karkesh Collective was no longer just advancing, they were anticipating every move. Like ghosts, they struck where they shouldn't have known to look. Varesh's second-in-command, fleet strategist Ralzek, approached from the side. "The High Council's message has arrived, Admiral. They've approved the Terran intervention." Varesh's mandibles clicked once in distaste, then fell still. "How many?" "Unclear. The transmission specifies only a lead advisor. They arrive within the hour by diplomatic shuttle." Varesh turned slowly. "One?" "Yes, Admiral." The silence stretched. Crew members exchanged quiet glances, careful not to be noticed. Varesh exhaled sharply through his gill vents. "What can one human do?" He muttered, not to Ralzek, not to anyone, just to the quiet room that answered with the soft hum of engines. Captain Daniel Hale stepped off the shuttle wearing the Terran Navy's black and silver uniform, clean but travel-wrinkled. He wasn't tall by Tsarek standards, nor heavily built, but he had a bearing that said he'd spent more hours in war rooms than on parade fields. A small duffel hung from one shoulder, and a dark bruise marbled the side of his temple pressurization error in the drop corridor, he explained curtly to the Dominion welcoming officer. Admiral Varesh met him at the hangar bay with practice ceremony. 4 honor guards stood flanking the ramp, motionless. Hale offered a short nod, and Varesh returned it with a formal incline of his torso. "Captain Hale," Varesh said, voice low, "your arrival was unexpected. Earth has chosen to send one." Hale didn't bristle. "One is what you asked for. I asked for assistance. And I'm what they sent. You can file a complaint." Varesh gestured down the corridor. "Your quarters are prepared. You'll be briefed on current operations in 3 standard hours. Until then, you may familiarize yourself with the vessel. Commander Ralzek will accompany." "I'd prefer to walk alone," Hale interrupted gently. "Observation is cleaner that way." Varesh's expression didn't change. "As you wish. You are, after all, our guest." He wandered for hours. Below the pristine bridge decks and War Council chambers, Hale found the guts of the Resplendent Fire, grimy maintenance conduits, food preparation bays, storage vaults, where tired quartermasters fought quietly with rusted inventory panels. The Dominion systems were sleek from the outside, but inside they creaked with wear. In a poorly lit auxiliary engineering corridor, Hale paused near a half-sealed hatch. 2 voices low, urgent spoke in clipped Dominion tones. They didn't match the relaxed chatter of engineers or the bark of authority, more like code words. He pressed closer. "Same transmission pattern as last cycle. Don't change the frequency until I say." A pause. "Unless they find it first." When footsteps echoed behind him, Hale stepped away casually, hands in pockets. The speaker's 2 junior officers passed him without recognition, eyes on their datapads. He waited until they turned a corner, then pulled a small disk from his belt. It was Terran military issue, standard decryption kit useless here. But Hale had time and access. Over the next 2 days, he rewired it using spare Dominion processors, tapping into old diagnostic ports. Dominion engineers were efficient, but uncreative. He slipped into the ship's unused relay networks like water through cracked stone. The code was dense, irregular fractal repetition patterns, nested decoys. But it wasn't unbreakable. Not to someone who'd once rerouted a Terran strike group through a quantum weather event mid-combat. He triangulated 3 origin points, all internal. 2 low-level staffers, 1 mid-rank logistics officer with access to convoy schedules. He compiled the data, scrubbed it, backed it thrice. Then he sent a quiet request to meet Varesh, alone. "You come with bold accusations," Varesh said, his lower arms folding tight across his chest. "Spies within my fleet, leaking every convoy route for the last 6 weeks," Hale replied, standing beside the Admiral's central holodeble. "You haven't lost Scath Prime because of force imbalance. You've lost it because the Karkesh know exactly when you're vulnerable." Varesh eyed the datapad Hale extended. "You believe the word of intercepted static and shadows in corridors over my officers?" "I believe patterns," Hale said simply, "and I believe your cargo haulers were destroyed because of those patterns." Varesh turned the datapad over in his hands. "I'll have our intelligence division verify this." "Already done. One of the junior officers you'll find in the logs was flagged for attempted access to command-level encryption." "And how do you know that?" "I installed a tap on the auxiliary comm diagnostics," Hale said. "Took me 2 days." Varesh looked up sharply. "You violated ship protocol. I also found your traitors." The Admiral stared at him for a long time. Then, without a word, he activated the intercom. "Bring me strategist Ralzek and a security team, quietly." When Dominion interrogators extracted the truth from the suspects painfully, methodically, it was the logistics officer who cracked first. He'd been feeding data to the Karkesh for months, thinking he was protecting his family on a frontier colony. But under the neural extractor, the rest spilled out too. Drop points, handlers, falsified reports, an entire espionage ring nested within the fleet. The War Council was silent the next morning. No chatter, no dissent, just the echo of heavy doors and the soft flicker of tactical maps. Varesh sat at the head, his expression unreadable. Captain Hale entered without ceremony, datapad tucked under one arm. He didn't speak first. He waited. Varesh's voice broke the silence. "You have our attention." The next weeks bled quietly. The spy network's purge had shaken the fleet in ways no exterior attack could. Officers spoke in clipped tones. Mid-level command staff were rotated or reassigned. Logs were triple verified. And through it all, Captain Daniel Hale remained precisely where he'd been, unranked, unarmed, and politely unacknowledged by most of the crew. Yet Varesh began forwarding briefings to him. Small ones at first: fuel manifest audits, patrol route data, supply reports from Scath Prime's orbital docks. Hale made no fuss. He annotated, redlined, and returned them within hours, always with a neat summary at the top. One such report led to the uncovering of a forged maintenance schedule on Bringer of Flame, the fleet's primary refueling ship, an oversight that would have stranded 6 cruisers mid-jump. Another quietly highlighted a time delay pattern in the automated defense grid over Scath Prime's southern hemisphere. Hale didn't accuse sabotage, only pointed out the risk. 2 days later, it was confirmed. A corrupted calibration drone had been feeding false data to the grid's targeting AI, creating 20-minute windows of vulnerability. The drone was Karkesh-made. Still, despite growing evidence, many in the fleet viewed him as a threat rather than an asset. Dominion culture prized formality, clear hierarchy, earned rank. Hale fit none of these molds. He gave no orders. He saluted no one. He offered insights as if they were suggestions, not directives. And yet, problems evaporated wherever he looked. Varesh didn't speak of it openly, but he began copying Hale on operational communiques. By the time the next strategic meeting convened, Hale was seated at the council table. Not at the front, not with a title, but present. The turning point came during a logistics crisis. 6 Dominion supply convoys had failed to reach Scath Prime in less than a month. The official blame: solar flare interference. Hale didn't buy it. He spent 72 straight hours combing old Dominion logistics codes, historical route data, and intercepted Karkesh chatter from unrelated battle zones. When he arrived in Varesh's office uninvited, his voice was hoarse from disuse. "You're being patterned," he said. Varesh looked up from the reports. "Explain." Hale dropped 3 projectors on the table. Blue holograms spun to life flight paths, timestamp overlays, loss maps. Every convoy loss happened within a 6-hour window, on a route variation tied to R sector winds. It's not random. The Karkesh aren't reacting. They're anticipating, but not from leaks anymore. They're using predictive mapping. Varesh leaned forward. You mean, every time you adjusted your schedule to be unpredictable, you were still feeding them patterns. They're studying your methods. I've reverse mapped the analysis method. You're not being outgunned. You're being solved. The room was silent. What do you propose? Break the pattern entirely, Hale said. We use an Earth-based algorithm called fractal route generation. Total unpredictability, randomized flight paths within resource constraints. We send 4 test convoys this way. If none are attacked, then we confirm their model. Varesh finished. And that's what they did. All 4 convoys arrived safely. Varesh called for Hale personally after the 4th arrival was confirmed. No intermediaries. No aides. You've bought us time, he said. Hale simply nodded. Now we use it. Command access came next. Not full, but real. Hale was assigned to the advanced planning chamber 2 levels below the main bridge, a dark, coffin-shaped room where Dominion officers rarely ventured, unless ordered. He worked alone, drawing up movement simulations, compiling Karkesh tactical behavior, and feeding recommendations up the chain. Quietly, Varesh allowed it all. What he did not expect was the scale of the plan Hale would eventually propose. Retreat? Ralzek said sharply. You're suggesting we abandon Scath Prime? Not abandon. Fake a retreat, Hale said. We create a high-volume withdrawal signature. Make it loud, leakable. It has to be obvious. Varesh remained still. They'll move in the moment we pull out. Hale nodded. That's what we want. Let them think we're crumbling. The Karkesh always overextend when they believe the momentum is theirs. We use that. Ralzek snorted. And how do you suggest we retake the system after we hand it to them? We don't, Hale replied, because we never actually leave. I've charted asteroid formations to the system's outer rim. We hide our best strike groups there under energy displacement netting. At the same time, stealth ships hold position above the northern orbital plane high-angle, low-EM signature. Once the Karkesh commit to landing operations, we snap the net. And if they detect your trap? Then we lose, Hale said. But we won't. I'm feeding the Karkesh false intel through their remaining internal contacts. They still think the leaks are real. Varesh narrowed his eyes. You're using the spy network we just exposed? I've been feeding it controlled data for 3 weeks. Nothing too suspicious. Just enough to lull them into believing it's business as usual. The final leak will confirm our fleet's supposed withdrawal vector. They'll bite. Even if they do, Ralzek said, their reinforcements will arrive within hours. We won't have time to fully encircle them. Hale brought up a map. We won't have to. I'll be leading a covert team to board their flagship. If I can disable their long-range comm arrays, the reinforcements won't even know they're needed. Not until it's too late. Varesh's expression hardened. That's suicide. It's a risk, Hale admitted, but I've led worse. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Varesh stepped forward. If this fails, Earth will be seen as an instigator of our final defeat. And if it works, Hale said, you win your war. The Admiral stared at him. Finally, he turned to Ralzek. Make preparations. The planning took 5 days. Hale didn't sleep more than 2 hours a night. He insisted on personally running the infiltration simulations, overseeing stealth maneuvers, and rechecking every detail of the enemy's orbital patterns. When an ensign pointed out that fatigue might compromise his judgment, Hale simply answered, "Fatigue only matters when I'm wrong." His boarding team was small, 8 Dominion Marines and himself. None had worked with him before, and one privately questioned why a human would risk his life for a war, not his own. Hale just checked his rifle and said, "I don't fight for empires. I fight for the people stuck in them." He didn't elaborate. 2 days before the operation, he collapsed. Slumped against a bulkhead outside his quarters, pale and shaking. A medic was called Dominion. Emergency units were fast, but not built for human physiology. He was barely conscious by the time they reached the infirmary. Diagnosis: severe exhaustion, mild dehydration, borderline hypoglycemia. Recovery would take at least 48 hours of rest and nutrient therapy. Varesh visited him the next cycle. The human looked worse without his uniform pale skin drawn tight over cheekbones, eyes sunken. He didn't try to sit up. "I told you to use our time wisely," Varesh said, not unkindly. "I did," Hale murmured. "You're not ready to lead a boarding team." "I will be." "No," Varesh said, stepping forward. "You will rest. I'll authorize a delay. 20 hours. Hale blinked, surprised. "You trust me that much?" "I trust your plan. I do not yet trust your health." Hale chuckled weakly. "That's fair." When the operation launched, Scath Prime was already swarming with Karkesh. They came in sleek, crescent-shaped vessels that shimmered with temporal distortion, slipping through folds in spacetime like knives through fabric. Dominion withdrawal signatures had drawn them in, just as planned. Across orbital space, hollowed-out shipyards, fake energy surges, and falsified logs painted the picture of a fleet in panic. The Karkesh believed what they saw. Hale had made sure of it. From his seat aboard the Dominion stealth frigate Shadow Warden, Hale watched as the enemy flagship, Voraktel, entered low planetary orbit. He said nothing, helmet sealed, gear checked 3 times over. His body was stiff from recovery, but his mind was sharp. The infirmary stay had forced a delay, and Varesh had used it well, tightening command coordination and confirming the enemy had fully taken the bait. Still, the price of his earlier collapse showed. He moved slower now. The Dominion medical unit had done what it could: IV fluids, protein loading, glucose regulation, but human bodies didn't bounce back from sleep deprivation and nutrient stress with mere injections. He still winced when moving too fast, and one knee bore a compression brace. The boarding pod detached from Shadow Warden in complete silence. No propulsion flare, no energy signature. Just inertial drift and stealth coding. Hale crouched beside the entry controls as the Marines tightened their harnesses. Their leader, Commander Saret, spoke low and firm. "You are certain about the array layout?" Hale nodded. Every Dominion ship class above carrier tonnage is built with the same external relay grid configuration. They may customize internals, but comms are always hardwired through the dorsal array to minimize quantum interference. We knock that out, they go dark. "And if we encounter resistance?" "You will," Hale said. "Just make sure I reach the relay core." Commander Saret didn't argue. None of them did anymore. The pod hit Voraktel's underbelly with a thud barely louder than a dropped wrench. Heat cutters flared for 2 seconds, then died. A circular hatch hissed open, and the team flooded in, weapons up. The interior was dim and sterile. The Karkesh valued mathematical symmetry. Everything was angles and recessed lighting, clean and sharp. They moved like predators, even on their own decks. The first contact was silent. A single enemy sentry, head turning just a second too late. One of Saret's team used a gravity pin to silence the kill. Hale didn't watch. They moved fast, 3 decks up. Hale had memorized the schematics during recovery, every access tunnel, every conduit. His body hated the pace, lungs burning. He kept moving. Then they hit resistance. A patrol's 6 Karkesh soldiers in armor that shimmered against the walls appeared ahead. The corridor lit with energy bolts. Dominion Marines returned fire immediately, their plasma bursts more direct, less elegant but brutally effective. Hale dropped to a crouch behind a wall rib. Something burned past his shoulder hot enough to scorch skin through his suit. Saret barked orders in Dominion dialect. One of the Marines was down, shot through the thigh, not dead, but out of the fight. Hale crawled forward, checking the map overlay in his visor. 2 decks up, he said. We can bypass the next corridor through a maintenance shaft. It'll take us to the relay core's outer buffer. Lead, Saret ordered. Hale didn't hesitate. The shaft was narrow, clearly not intended for fully armored soldiers. Dominion Marines scraped through with inches to spare. Hale, thinner and more flexible, moved faster until a sudden cramp in his leg forced him to stop. His calf seized, hardened. He gritted his teeth, jaw clenched. The earlier collapse had come with muscular depletion. This was the price. He massaged the leg through the suit, inhaling sharply, then forced himself onward. When he emerged into the relay buffer chamber, sweat lined his spine. The array control unit stood like a monolith, 3 meters tall, blinking faintly. Hale moved to the base, ripped a panel away, and set down the disruptor unit he'd built using Dominion stealth hardware fused with Terran Chaos code algorithms. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. "Cover me," he said. Surratt and the others took position. One of the Marines limped, now hit in the shoulder, but stayed on watch. Hale connected the first line. Sparks flew. The array fought him, trying to reboot. He muttered under his breath, running the override, triggering the disruptor's cascade pulse. This wasn't destruction. It was misdirection. He couldn't let the Karkesh know they were blind. He needed them to think their systems were functional, while the entire tactical grid failed silently. It took 5 minutes. 5 agonizing, cramped minutes under fire. Then confirmation. The array went dark. He staggered back, just as enemy fire rattled through the bulkhead. "Job's done," he said, breathing hard. "Get us out." Meanwhile, at the edge of the asteroid field, Varesh gave the signal. Hundreds of cloaked ships powered up in unison, breaking their camouflage with silent fury. From Scath Prime's orbital horizon, they looked like a metal tide. The Karkesh fleet reacted instantly, at least, tried to. But their orders never reached half their ships. The Voraktel didn't answer calls. Their internal coordination collapsed. Dominion strike squadrons swooped in from above. Stealth cruisers fired pinpoint salvos into weak points Hale had catalogued days before. Enemy vessels, isolated by their own disrupted comms, were picked off in brutal sequence. The Karkesh counterattack, once swift and unified, turned staggered and confused. And then came the resplendent fire. Varesh's flagship led the charge, weapons blazing, flanked by 6 dreadnoughts. It pierced through the fractured center of the Karkesh line, targeting fuel nodes and propulsion arrays. Hulls ruptured. Explosions dotted the battlefield like volcanic eruptions. In 30 minutes, the Karkesh fleet had been reduced by half. In another 20, their retreat turned to rout. Hale didn't see the final moments of the battle. He was back aboard Shadow Warden, arm around Surratt as both limped through the boarding corridor. A Dominion medic caught them halfway and immediately assessed Hale's state. The pain in his leg was worse now, deep, throbbing. He collapsed onto a stretcher without resistance. A quick scan revealed micro tears in the calf muscle and a minor ligament strain. The medic wrapped the leg and started IV fluids. "You should not have been walking on this," she said. "I wasn't walking," Hale murmured. "I was winning." She shook her head and adjusted the drip. He blacked out before the ship rejoined the fleet. Hours later, back on resplendent fire, the War Council reconvened. The room was different now. Where suspicion once ruled, there was quiet respect. Varesh stood at the head of the table. This victory, he said, was not won by firepower. It was won by insight, precision, sacrifice. He looked across the room to where Hale sat in a chair, leg elevated, wrapped and braced, face pale but alert. "Captain Hale," Varesh said, "you asked me once if I trusted your plan. I did. You asked for time. I gave it. But you never asked what I would say if you succeeded." He stepped forward, raised one arm, and extended it in a formal clasp. Hale took it. Varesh's voice dropped, but every officer heard him. One human can end a war. The debrief took 3 days. Even in victory, the Tsaric Dominion demanded order. Varesh personally oversaw the battle report consolidation, loss tallies, salvage prioritization, and prisoner interrogation directives. Hale, still confined to the medical wing with his leg in a compression brace and on a mild course of pain suppressors, received visitors in waves, each one higher in rank, each more courteous than the last. They all came with questions. Tactical officers dissected his data manipulation. Fleet strategists studied the fractal routing algorithms he'd adapted. Intelligence directors sought insight into how he'd repurposed a corrupted spy network into a disinformation tool. Hale answered every question with dry clarity, often punctuated by quiet silences when exhaustion outpaced articulation. He wasn't sleeping well. Even after the worst pain had dulled, his body struggled to find rhythm again. Dominion sleep cycles weren't synchronized with human ones. The ship's lighting followed their standard 34-hour rotation, which left Hale constantly disoriented. The medics did their best, adjusting his room's ambient controls, mimicking Earth like gravity, fine-tuning his nutritional intake, but full recovery would take weeks. Not just the leg, all of it. He knew the warning signs, subtle tremors in his fingers when he reached for the cup, moments of blank stare when someone spoke his name. Once, he stood too fast and nearly blacked out. His body was catching up to what his mind had already known. This had cost him. He wasn't dying, but he wasn't whole either. Not yet. And he'd accepted that. One morning, perhaps morning, he couldn't tell Varesh visited alone. No aides, no guard. He stood beside the medical bed without speaking for a long time. Hale didn't force a greeting. Just watched the Admiral study him, as if cataloging what the war had extracted from both of them. "You look smaller," Varesh finally said. Hale raised an eyebrow. "I am. Down 6 kilos. I don't recommend subsisting on adrenaline and sarcasm." Varesh's antennae twitched faintly. Hale had learned by now that it was the Dominion equivalent of something between amusement and hesitation. "I've reviewed your psychological record," Varesh said. "You've performed similar operations before, risked yourself beyond protocol. Why?" Hale shifted in bed, winced slightly. "Because those missions mattered. So does this one." "Exactly." Varesh turned toward the small viewport. Beyond, the stars were motionless, serene. "When I first heard Earth would send only one of you, I was insulted," he said. "I thought it an afterthought, a diplomatic gesture, a concession." He looked back at Hale. "But now I understand. It wasn't one man they sent. It was every lesson your species has learned about war, about chaos, about survival, encapsulated in you." Hale looked away. "I'm not a lesson. I'm a patchwork of bad decisions and better timing." Varesh stepped closer. "Modesty is a choice, so is denial. But what you accomplished at Scath Prime altered the trajectory of 2 civilizations. Even now, the Karkesh are in full retreat. Their fleets fractured, their command in disarray. The High Council prepares peace terms." Hale exhaled slowly. "And the traitor networks?" "Unraveling. You used their trust against them. Dozens are being interrogated. A few have defected entirely. Your leaks were too specific, they exposed themselves." "That was the idea," Hale murmured. "Clever liars can't resist a trap that flatters their cleverness." Varesh made a low sound of approval. He reached into his coat and placed a small object on the table beside Hale's cot. It was a Dominion honor clasp, deep bronze, set with a tiny crystal that pulsed softly with internal resonance. Hale recognized it from briefings. Rare, usually awarded posthumously. "You want me to wear that?" he asked. "No," Varesh said. "I want you to take it. Keep it. Whether you wear it is your choice, but it is earned." Hale didn't touch it. Not yet. He wasn't sure he could. The Terran diplomatic shuttle arrived 1 week later. By then, Hale had been able to stand unassisted, though he still favored the leg. Dominion medics had cleared him for atmospheric transit, provided he avoided sudden stress or extended upright duration. He'd nodded through their checklist without arguing. His quarters were packed into a single case, half filled with data pads and field notes the Dominion had asked to copy. The rest was mostly empty. He hadn't come with much. Before he left, Varesh met him once more, this time in the hangar bay, not as a courtesy but as a gesture. No honor guard, no ceremony. Just 2 men who'd endured. "I told you once," Varesh said, "that I did not understand what one human could do." Hale nodded. "You weren't alone." "I was wrong." The Admiral extended his arm again, in the clasp Hale had come to understand as the Tsarek's deepest gesture of respect. Hale took it. "This war is ending," Varesh said, "but peace will be difficult. Harder than war in many ways. Your insights may yet be needed again." "I hope not," Hale said. "But if you call, I'll answer." Varesh paused, then, slowly, nodded. "Farewell, Captain Hale." Back aboard the Terran shuttle, Hale sank into the acceleration chair, leg propped, arm resting across his chest. As the engines warmed, he looked through the rear viewport one last time. The resplendent fire was still in orbit, scarred and mighty. Beyond it, Scath Prime glimmered faintly under its polar storms. A planet that had almost been lost. A war that almost broke them. He let his eyes close,